Fantastic. Looks like everybody's exhausted. So let's go ahead and start sharing. Oh dear, I have too many windows open, don't I? Yep. Okay. That one is fine. Where is my VS Code? Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my VS Code now. Okay, great. So if you go to the curriculum page for today, which is week 14, day 1, you'll see the starter code, which has the application at the end of yesterday's lesson, which is the end of day 7 branch. If you don't have it downloaded already, you can go ahead and clone down that branch. And that is basically the exact thing that I am working off of today. So let me just share the whole screen for a second. So as you can see here, I mean, I did this a little while before class. I've made my migrations. I can go into my console. Well, up there is kind of cheating. I've been running my Docker container, as you can see, because I have Docker Compose up is running. And I can also, go in exec into my database, which I'm doing right now. And we can do, let's do a /D. So that'll tell me all the tables in it. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong database. There we go. I need to go into the Pokedex database. That's why it wasn't working. We do /D, and we see I have all my tables in there. I've got my table for move, I've got my table for Pokemon, and I've got my middle table for the Pokemon app Pokemon moves, which is exactly what I'm looking for. So, however, I don't really have any data inside any of these tables. So, let's go to the Pokemon one. I don't actually have any data in there right now. So the table is slightly sad. Okay, so today is all about CRUD. What is CRUD? CRUD basically gives you the 4 abilities. It's create, you can read, you can update, and delete, which is basically the big 4 things that you'll need to do whenever you're dealing with data. So, think about any sort of database that you're making. What's something I have on my Okay, I have a banana on my table. Well, let's say that you're writing code for a company that buys and sells bananas in giant boxes. Well, you have an inventory of, let's say, a bajillion boxes. How are you going to keep track of all of those boxes? Well, you're going to need to create something that creates a box, right? If a brand new shipment comes in from the factory to a packaging plant or whatever, and all those bananas get put in a box, you need to find a way to add that box to your database. So that's where the create comes in. You need to be able to read the box. If I give you a crate of bananas, I want you to be able to tell me, what farm the bananas came from, how many bananas there are, the total weight, stuff like that. That's the read functionality. Now, let's say that quality control comes around, and apparently half of my bananas have been eaten by rats or something. But because we're an evil capitalistic company, we're going to forget about the other half and assume they're perfectly fine and send them to customers, which is terrible, but it's something a company could do. So how do we update? How do we tell our database, hey, half of the bananas in this crate are now rotten? How do I update that? Update functionality. And lastly, let's say that a bunch of monkeys invade your banana storage facility and steal 5 crates. These are very intelligent monkeys. So obviously these 5 crates have now disappeared from your inventory. So you need to delete them from your database. And it's a simple example, but that's basically where the 4 types of functions that we're talking about come in handy. You need to, if for any type of database, data type, data thing, you need to be able to create the thingy, you need to be able to read the thingy, you need to be able to update the thingy, and you need to be able to delete the thingy. So those are the big 4 things that we are going to start working on tonight. Anybody have questions about what CRUD is or why we use it? Or if anybody wants an example that makes more sense, I can provide it. Everybody good? Okay, great. So right now, somebody tell me, based off of what we've learned so far. Yeah, don't do anything crazy. What we have probably covered two ways. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Two ways to create data or alter data in our tables. So, well, I guess three, but we're not going to do anything with the admin panel right now. So can somebody tell me if I have here, let me go to the Pokemon app. I'll go to the models. And we have a bunch of things here. We have a name, level, date. Okay. And Dunder methods. So I would like to create a Pikachu with a bunch of things. How can I create a Pikachu? Based off of what we've learned so far, like somebody give me the step-by-step instructions to go from empty database to a database with a Pikachu in it.
You go into Python shell,
Okay, how do I do that? Do I just do like Python?
manage.py shell.
Why do I need to type the manage.py shell? Why can't I just use like, isn't Python itself just the regular console? Why do I have to go through the manage?
I feel like that's the file that kind of controls all the things for Django. I don't know like
Yeah,
how to really
that's
describe it other than that.
Yep, that's correct. So basically, whenever we're doing something Django related, we always go through the manage.py. And that's especially in this case, because we're going to be playing around with models. Now, our models, or our Pokemon class, comes from models.model. Models.model is something that comes from Django itself. And that is something that Python, that the manage.py shell in our Django project already knows about. So it makes it a lot easier to run stuff in the Django Python shell than in the regular Python shell. So that's why we use it. But all right, thank you, Ken. So let's see, can we get somebody else to what are the next steps I need to take in order to fabricate a Pokemon?
From Pokemon app, import the name of your class. Maybe it's Pokemon. That's my guess. I don't know. Yeah, it is.
Pokemon app.models.
Perfect. That's what I was going to ask next. Thank you. But always remember that we need to import from the specific PY file, right? So, and remember, Pokemon app is the big folder. We need to go into that folder and go to the models. All right, so we can import Pokemon from there. I think it's probably imported. What next?
You can store a new instance in a variable and
Sure.
then save it.
Chris, tell me how to do that.
You can do Pokemon1 equals uppercase Pokemon, and then just add the required fields to that.
So you said Pokemon.
Or it's objects.
So say that one more time.
Yeah, it's Pokemon dot objects.
Okay.
I don't know if the O is capitalized or not, and then I believe it's add.
Okay. And then from here, we just need to put in thingies. So we'll just say that this is Pikachu, how the level is 4. I think we can just leave the date. That should be able to be left blank. Captured, we can say is false. And description, we can also leave blank. And moves, we can leave that blank as well. So let's see, that's 1, 2, that's blank, that's false, that's blank, that's blank. Okay, so let's see if this works. Oh, what happens if I just do, here, let's see. See if we can just do this. Oh, wait, what am I missing? Oh, that's why. Let's go here and let's try that again. So we'll say Pikachu, and 4. Okay, so it looks like I'm getting this error over here. It says manager object has no attribute add.
Yeah, it's create, not add, I believe.
Okay, perfect. Let's try that now. So we'll say create, and we'll say Pikachu, and we'll say 4. Let's see what happens if I leave everything else blank. Query set.create takes 1 positional argument, but 3 were given. Can anybody tell me why this is going wrong?
I mean, when I've done it before, I would be like, name equals Pikachu, level equals 4. And I would assign the values to each specific column in the table.
Right, like Pikachu equals Pokemon parentheses.
Yep, that's exactly it. Thank you. So yeah, when we're creating a brand new object, we don't need to say dot add or dot create. We literally just need to say Pokemon. But like just instantiate it like we would instantiate a regular class, right? So we can say like name is Pikachu, level is 4. I don't think we need to put in a date. Here, let's see if what happens if I just leave it blank. Yeah, perfect, that works. So I've created my Pokemon now, and if I refresh my database, it's not there. Why is it missing?
You have to save it, I believe.
Yes, we do have to save it. So we're gonna do that by saying Pokemon1.save. Aha. So no value in column captured. Right, let's see. Is there a way to... Okay, yeah, let's try maybe saying Pokemon1.change caught status, and then we'll set this to false. And let's do that now. All right, so we've saved it, and let's do that again. Ta-da! Our Pokemon has been successfully created. Now, we have to go through a bunch of steps. So, I mean, just running back through it, what do we have to do? Well, let's go all the way to the top. Oh, that was from last class. Let's go. So the first thing we had to do was import Pokemon, right? Then after we imported Pokemon, we had to instantiate our Pokemon using this. Then after that, we had to save it. I mean, that's a couple of steps. Now, adding user input to that sure sounds like we're just going to have to make this even more complicated. So, and also, we don't have an easy way to do this from an API. Like, all of this is all within the Python shell. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a way that was, I'm not going to say fully user-friendly, but marginally user-friendly for us to do this? So that is exactly what we're going to be implementing tonight. So I'm going to exit out of here. Again, we do have our Pokemon sitting nice and pretty in there. So again, the thing that we need to add today is, here, well, let's see. We need to add in some views. So if we take a look here, you guys have already added these views before for getting all the Pokemon and a selected Pokemon. So what I want to do is I want to go into Postman, and can somebody tell me how do I use these views? I'll also open up my my URLs in a separate window so we can go to those too. But if I've got my Postman open right now, how do I let's say I want to look at all the Pokemon in my view. How can I do that? What do I have to do?
Spool up your server.
Okay, perfect. They'll do Python manage.py run server. Okay. I'm not gonna run it right in the browser, but okay, looks like that's spooled up. What next?
Find your endpoints.
Okay,
Or the
how do I
one you're
find the
looking for.
endpoints then?
I'll go to the main URLs folder first.
So
And
that would be in here.
yeah.
All right, let's pop this open here. Move this. Okay.
I would guess you'd have to start with the top one, the API v1 Pokemon.
Sure. So
Um,
let's try that.
Probably going to be part of it potentially.
Okay. So let's move this here. And this is old. So we'll put in, oh, I can delete that. Don't save. Okay. So I've got my API v1 Pokemon. So that will link us to the Pokemon app URLs, which is this guy. And if I need to view all the Pokemon, we don't add in anything else to the end. We should be good. So if I just send this and we give it a second, we see down here we can do it in a pretty mode, which it is. We get it back in JSON, and it says model is Pokemon app Pokemon. Then the fields for this guy are Pikachu, level 4, we got a date, etc. Great. So we can read all of our Pokemon. At the same time, if I wanted to, let's say, get a specific Pokemon, let's say I wanted to get the Pokemon with ID 2, I can just do 2 and send that like so, and then we just get the specific Pokemon. Okay, so we've already built out our read functionality. However, we don't have a functionality to update or write or delete, or create, actually. So right now, tonight, all we're going to do is, tonight, all we're going to be doing is adding on a put request, which is going to add, again, an update functionality. But we will be working on adding in creation and deletion soon as well. Just not right now. Okay, so
Quick question.
yes.
So what we did manually with the shell was to do a put.
Yes and no. So what we did manually was a create. We can try doing a put manually if you'd like to see what that looks like.
If it's not necessary, I don't know if there would be a point in doing that.
Does anybody want to see what a put request looks like in the terminal? Like particularly strongly?
Not really.
Okay, great. We can skip that then. No problems at all. Okay, so again, what we just did in Postman was a GET request, right? Why is this a GET request? Because we are getting information from our SQL database and pulling it back in through our Django custom API. So the next thing that we also want, also let me just go down here. These are the different types of methods that are available for an HTTP or hypertext transfer protocol request. Okay, so the one that we're using right now is get. Get equals read. Same thing. Post equals, like, the way I like to think about it is like you're sending something out in the post, or like you're posting something to like Instagram or Facebook or whatnot. You're creating a brand new thing. So post is going to be your create method. Put and patch are both update methods. They do slightly different things. So put will update the entire thing, while patch will update like parts of it. We won't get into patch methods. We're only going to deal with put right now, just to keep it simple. So put and patch are update, because they both have use. That's how I like to remember it. And delete is pretty easy. I mean, CRUD has delete. The HTTP has delete. They both do the same thing. So there's a few other things in here like head and options. There's also trace, but we won't be talking about those tonight. So tonight, our goal is going to be to turn this get into a put request. That's all we're going to be doing. So we're gonna do everything relating, so anything and everything relating to CRUD capabilities will almost always, I guarantee it, be in your views.py. So your models.py is going to be where you set up your models and you set up your databases. Your views are going to be where you have your, calling the things that are interacting directly with your API. And then your urls.py is going to be the things that the user goes to or the thing your front end interacts with to go to your database. So let's start off with our put request. So it's going to look similar to our get request, but we're not going to, but let's think about it for 1 second before we start coding. Where would it make sense to put the put request? Because we're going to do it within one of our existing views. Does it make more logical sense to update all Pokemon or to update a selected Pokemon? Which one just sounds like it makes sense?
Selected.
Yeah, selected, right? Because you don't really want to update every single Pokemon with, insert X property. I mean, unless you do, but we're not doing that tonight. So we're going to add a put method to the bottom of this guy. So we're going to define the put method basically in the exact same way that we're going to define that we defined our get method. So we'll say define put, and then we'll type the exact same parameters. We're going to have self. And again, it's a class method. We're going to have the request that's coming in, and we're going to have the ID. And inside, I'm just going to put a pass so it doesn't throw me any errors. Oh, let me quit my server. So something I also like to do, which I think I mentioned before, I'll mention it again. Only run your server when you're actively testing. If you are if you're not testing at that exact moment and you're editing some code or modifying your models or something, don't keep your server running. Switch it off, because sometimes you can have issues where your server is running and you're modifying your views or your models, and then one of your endpoints goes whoop, and then you start seeing a bunch of error logs, which are not fun. So don't run your server all the time. Only run it basically when you're using it. Okay, so before we jump in to the put request, just want to check something very quickly to make sure that, okay, we can do that. Let's do that first. So before we start coding our put method, I'd like us to think about pseudocode. So, okay, let's say, in the way that we structure a put request in Postman is basically by doing the exact same thing as we do, dropped something. This exact same thing that we do for a get request. We're going to put the ID of the thing that we are getting. But unlike a get request, a put request is going to have a body in it, which is something like that. So I'm just going to copy paste the fields in because it's nice and quick. And we'll paste it here. And let me just correct the spacing so that it doesn't yell at me. Whoop. Yep, that looks good. That looks good. And, let's say, I don't want to save the request. Let's say, now I want to change, we'll keep the name as Pikachu. We'll change the level from 4 to 40. And we'll say that this guy has been captured. And we'll say the description is Pika. Okay. So remember, for our get request, we don't need to have anything in the body, right? I mean, I can spin up that server again really quickly. Let's do that real quick. We'll spin up the server. It is running. I'm going to copy paste this. I'm going to change this to a get request. Nothing in the body, right? I run it and I can still get the Pokemon back. However, with the put request, we're trying to change the values we want to update the values of the thingy that we're accessing. And the way that we check the values and update them is by telling it what values you want to update. You tell it what values you want to update via the body. So let's go back here. Want to stop running the server. And so let's think about how we're going to do this. So anybody have ideas as to, given a specific Pokemon ID and information we want to update, can somebody tell me how they would, again, using just like general regular English language, how would you go about updating that Pokemon? Let's see. Actually, I might just call on somebody since I noticed there've only been like 4 people who've spoken tonight. Let's see. Who should I call on now? Joyce. Hi. Do you have any ideas for us about how we might structure a put method?
So I haven't really caught up on all the classes I missed last week, so
Okay.
not really, sorry.
All good. Do you guys really want me to pick somebody else, or will somebody volunteer and save the rest of the class from detention?
I would.
Okay. Go for it.
So like, let's say you wanted to update the description. I would do like Pokemon dot description equals blah blah blah.
Okay. But again, so let's back up from the actual code for a second. Let's just talk about broad pseudocode. So
Okay.
pretend like I'm giving you like an input and I want an output. The input I'm giving you is this. I'm giving you the ID number and I'm giving you all the stuff I want updated. What I want at the end is all of my stuff to be updated. So what is my black box going to do in the middle?
I guess
It's just. Oh, sorry, Harry. You can
I
go.
was just gonna say that I guess first we need to figure out there are many categories. So which one? There's some that didn't change, so we will ignore that. I would say like the first pseudocode, ignore the ones that didn't change, and focus on the ones that actually changed.
So we can do that. I'll just add that in for now. As you'll see, we won't really end up doing that. But that is, that is something good to. Well, actually, I guess that is kind of something that we'll do. Let's do that. If any parameters are different / keywords different keywords are mentioned, do specific stuff. Okay. But let's think even more basic for a sec. If I just give you an ID, like I just tell you the ID of this thing. If I tell you the number 2, how do I go from the number 2 to the appropriate object that we need to change?
First, you need to get the Pokemon according to the ID.
Perfect.
then-
Thank you, Chris.
And then since we're using put, we plan on replacing everything. So we basically can set each field to what's in the body. It's kind of how I would approach it.
Okay. So set each field to what the body says. And are we done after that? There's at least 1, 2, no, I guess we could say 1 to 2 more steps remaining, depending on how you do it. So I'll give you guys a hint.
You probably gotta,
Say that one more time, Ken.
you probably need to save it.
Yeah. So we're now, once we're done with everything, first thing we want to do is verify data integrity, right? Because if somebody's like putting in like a SQL injection in the body of their request and you're adding it willy-nilly to your database, or they're adding in some malicious code or something, well, you don't want that. So first we should verify data integrity. After that, we're in a much better place to save it. Save our Pokemon. And then the last thing, which is you don't have to do, I would recommend doing it sort of as a courtesy to your user, is also just like tell the user that the Pokemon was successfully modified. Or you could just like return the Pokemon. So these are basically the fields that we're going to be using for our put request. So this is the framework that we are basically going to code mostly exactly along. So let's start off from the top. How can I get my Pokemon using its ID?
Call the get method.
Okay. How do I call the get method?
Since it's another method, you could probably just go self dot the name of it.
Okay. So so I just say like self dot get, and then we'll just say what request, and then ID. And do I just leave it? Oops. Do I just leave it like no? Stop that. Okay, go. Nope. Oh my goodness. Okay, stop doing this. Why are there? Okay, there we go. So now that we have, we also need to like set this equal to something, right? So we could call this like Pokemon TBU. I'm just going to say that this is going to be get Pokemon to be updated. I'm going to say that is what TBU means. I don't think TBU is an actual term, but it works for differentiating it because if you just type in generic Pokemon like that, you could very easily mistype it and type that top part with a capital P. And well, that looks really similar to your class name. So I always recommend keeping your variable names slightly, but like not easily distinguishable. Or sorry, slightly and easily distinguishable from your class name. And in my opinion, that's just a good way to do things. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is get the Pokemon to be updated. And we're calling that Pokemon TBU. Okay, so the next thing that we can do is check what parameters are in the body. So according to the specs for tonight, what we need to do for the specific stuff that Harry was mentioning is we need to first check whether the user wants us to level up our Pokemon. And we say level up if level is mentioned. And similarly, we want to say set to captured if captured is mentioned. How can I do these things?
Conditionals.
Okay. How do I do that? So let's start with the first one. So how do I check if level is mentioned? So the first thing I would like to ask is, where would the user tell you that level needs to be changed? And we can look back here, but where would that be?
Gonna be in the request data.
Yes, in the request data. Thank you. So the first thing that we need to check is see if level in, and then we just say request dot data. Easy peasy. So now we're checking, hey, has level been mentioned? If level is mentioned there, we now need to set the level to whatever level it is that has been set. Do we have a function to set the level? I'm pretty sure we do. I just don't remember the name off the top of my head. Let's find it. Yeah, level up. Okay. So now, if we have a level, all I need to do is say Pokemon TBU dot level, was it level up? 2 words, okay? Level up, And then in our level up function, all we need to, well, now we need to figure out how to get the level that the user wants. Ideas. How do I get the level from request.data?
Request.data and then level in brackets.
Yes, so request.data, and then we can just say level like that. So if level is included, aka if this guy is mentioned, then it will automatically update the level to whatever thing the user has custom set. Okay, we can basically do the exact same thing if captured is mentioned. This is basically a copy paste. If captured is in request.data, we just need to also change the function to this guy. We'll change it to change caught status, and then we'll just get the data for captured. And that's it. So we've set the field to what the body tells us to, so we can delete that guy. The last thing that we need to do now is verify our data integrity and save our Pokemon. So what tool do I use in Django, just generally, to verify that our data is not weird or wrong or some combination of the two? I'll give you a hint. It's in the models.py. It's actually located. You can actually see it 2 times on the screen right now.
Like if you want to change the name, like if someone puts a name that is more than 255 characters, that should not be the integrity is not right. Is that what you mean?
Close. So I think the chat got it with validators. So what we're looking for is whenever we put in data, we never want to save it right away, which is something I did down there, I know. But in general, when we're not just dealing with testing data, when we're actually putting in real world data, which is what we're training for right now, we need to make sure that the data is valid, right? We want to make sure that our Pokemon name doesn't have any @ signs or like exclamation marks or things like that. We want to make sure our description isn't, like 1 character. So we need to run our validators before we can actually save our Pokemon. So to do that, we're just going to do Pokemon TBU, and I'm just going to run a full clean on it, just to run all the validators and check those and make sure our validators and validations are valid. If those are good, then we're going to, we can just basically save our Pokemon at that point. And now the last thing that I'd like us to do is use another tool that sounds very similar to validators, which is serializers. So can anybody tell me what the difference is between a validator and a serializer, and why I'm thinking that we should use a serializer here?
A validator makes sure the data that you're inputting is correct before you put it in the database. And a serializer just takes the data and like puts it into like binary or something and then turns it into JSON.
Yeah, pretty much. So the reason that we use serializers, which is what we're going to do in probably under a minute, is to turn the data into something that's easy to use for other data formats. The validators are basically just like a box check. Like, does this pass the basic requirements for the field? Yeah, okay, we're good. The serializer takes that validated data, spins it into some code. That code can be turned into JSON. So that's what we're going to do now. So what I want us to do is we're going to say Pokemon TBU, and I'm going to call this serialized. I'm going to create a new variable for it. And we're going to create a brand new JSON loads, which will turn this into something that we can return as a response. And now we're just going to serialize in JSON format what are we going to serialize? Our Pokemon TBU. And that will, again, serialize our data and return that as JSON to us. And the last thing that I'd like to do is actually return the thing. And to return it, we just say return response, and we return our serialized data. And that's it. That is how we create a put method. So we get the thing that we need to change. We make our changes based off of whatever parameters are included. We verify the data integrity by using our validators, and we save it. And last but not least, we turn it into JSON and return it. Serializer is basically used to create JSON out of the data. That's pretty accurate. You can use serializers for JSON formats, for XML. I'm pretty sure there's one or two others. Most of the time, you'll use a serializer for JSON, but there are other formats that you can use. But that's basically the whole point of them.
And then just to consolidate what we have been talking about so far, when I said put earlier, I meant post, what we did manually.
Yes, so what we did manually was a post request, which is what you guys will be doing tomorrow. So the post request is relatively similar to put. You guys will see that tomorrow, but it shares a lot of similarities because you're basically doing some of the same steps. So you'll be setting all of your parameters based off of what the user inputs. You'll be checking the data and you'll be adding it to the list. Same thing. So this guy just doesn't create a new Pokemon. It just takes the old one and saves it. That's all.
When you are maybe I'm getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but when you do post data to the database, can you do it in like a batch like we did when we were doing PSQL with like the seed.sql file? Or do you have to literally post everything one by one? Like if you want to fill your database in Django, is there an easy way to do that?
So what you would have to do is you'd have to write a custom post function that, I mean, you can do it. So the only question I would have for you is, how would you input everything? So what you could do is, go to your body like here, and then just basically like put in multiple Pokemon in the body, and then each of those gets posted. For that, you'd probably have to custom write a function that would basically iterate over each Pokemon and say post each individual Pokemon. I don't believe that you can mass add to a database in Django using a batch style format, but that is what I just mentioned is probably the approach I would take. If you have a large amount of data, it's honestly probably just easiest to like insert as SQL. If you have like a ton of data. Usually the only time you really want to use a post request like in this format are basically only for like small amounts of like hand inserted data. So like something that a user would do.
So are you saying that this would not be the method to populate a database with a lot of data, but there is a method in Django?
You can use this to help. You can't use this exact method, but you can use it to help.
Okay.
I guess that's a good question because then if I have a web app that I use for my personal, like I have a website and I have a bunch of patients with a bunch of data, and for some reason, I want to change frameworks or something, and I want to get all that SQL data, like I have that stored somewhere, so I don't have to input all of that again because it lives in SQL. But if a new patient is coming to my clinic and I need to get information from them through the front end, they're going to provide that information, and this request, it's what they're going to essentially be doing to send me that information that will populate now to the database.
Yep. So you can think of this essentially as like when you go to the doctor and you fill out that new patient form. this is the new patient form. Now, imagine giving the doctor like 100 new patient forms that are all for your old patients that you transferred over. That's really inefficient. There are better ways to do it. Like again, using the insert into in SQL or making a custom Django function that's different from put in this form. But they have two fundamentally different, slightly different, but still different functions. Does that kind of help? All right. Do you guys want to see this thing in action? I'm going to assume the answer is yes. If it's not, well, you're seeing it anyway. So let's run up the server. Let's go here. First, I want to make sure that I haven't critically broken anything, especially my get function. Then we're going to run the get function. It works. So now we're going to do the put, and let's look at the body. So we don't actually need half of these fields in here. We'll just keep these guys. We'll keep the name, level, and capture. And you know what? Just for, we'll also put in description. So what things do I expect to change when I hit send on this? Right? In our views, we told it, hey, only change level and capture. Forget everything else. So ideally, the description should not change, and the name should stay the same. I want level to go to 40 and capture to now become true. Let's see what happens when I hit send. Okay, that was not what I was expecting. Response object has no attribute level up. Let's see, I think I may have forgotten a line somewhere. Yes. Okay. So we do have a slight problem. And this is something that the documentation covers for today, and that's what we're going to do right now. Self.get. If we look at our get function returns a response. It doesn't actually return a Pokemon. It returns JSON to us. So if I say Pokemon self.get, it's going to set Pokemon TBU as a response. Inside that response lives a serialized Pokemon. We do not want that. We need the actual original Pokemon object as a Pokemon class. How do we do that? This is where a custom function that we will now write is going to come in to play. So we're going to call this custom function get Pokemon. And this is not going to take in a request because this is not related to our API at all, or our API calls. All this is going to do is take in self and an ID. And all this function is going to do is this function is going to return a actual Pokemon object correlating, or I guess with the given ID number. The difference between this, I need to say this. The difference between this and the get function is the get function returns a response, which is exactly why we get the error that a response object has no attribute level up. So let's write the get Pokemon function now. So the first thing that first of all, how can I get a given a Pokemon object given an ID? This was something I think that was alluded to a while ago relating to objects. Anybody want to tell me how I can use objects to get the Pokemon object in question?
I think you could just do Pokemon dot objects dot get ID equals ID.
Yeah. So I know for today they say check if the name is the ID dot title. So we can go ahead and do that as well. So we'll just say if the ID is an integer, we'll just return it normally. Else, we'll just return Pokemon object.get, and then we'll just get it by saying by the name, and that'll just be the ID type. So we now have, a get Pokemon function. Great. Now this basically replaces like all of this stuff, which is great. So now instead of saying Pokemon equals none if type ID equals, else, blah, 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 all we need to do is basically yoink all of that out and just say Pokemon is self.get Pokemon, and then just put in the ID. And the get function, hypothetically, should still work if we were to do this. Because again, all this is doing is getting us the original Pokemon. How do I know that it's the original Pokemon? Because it's returning a Pokemon object. Boom. So any questions about the difference between the get Pokemon function and the get function? That's right above it.
Hey, real quick, the ID that title, where's that title coming from again? Was that built in? Because I thought it was name.
I just lost that. Oh, you're talking about down here?
Yes.
That is a good question. As far as I'm aware, that's because it's a character field, I believe, is that it's like the first and only character field that it's treated as ID.title. But that is a good question.
I think it just capitalizes it because that's a common format with I forget if it's with Django or not.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's in some other one of the other lessons.
I think I remember using it as a validator now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's why we use the name equals ID.title there. So let me just save this real quick. Make sure it works. First, we're going to test this. Again, going back to the one that worked before, which was our get method. Yay, the get method works. All right, so now we can change it to the put method, change it back to pretty. If everything goes well, hopefully this will change level to 40, and it will change capture to true. Before I do that, I also just want to go into Postgres, make sure everything's as we want, send it, and that happened again, okay? Pokemon object is not iterable. All right, where is that one coming from? Here, let's see if I can find a line.
I think it said line 132 on there.
Oh, did it? Thank you. Let's see, there's no 132 here.
No, damn, never mind.
Let's see. I think the problem may be, oh, I see why. Serializer. So the reason that the error is coming up is if we take a look at what it says here, it says the error is in my serializers on line 32. Now, I have never touched the virtual environment files, which is where this error is apparently located. But it says the problems with serialize. So let me look at all the places I use serialize. I only use it once, which is right here. Now, a serializer only works on a list. You can't serialize a singular object. If you want to, you have to put it in a list, which is what I'm going to do right now. So I put it in this list, and then it can iterate over all the Pokemon in that list. There's just one here. Try this again. Okay, there we go. It now says that the level of my Pokemon is 40 and that it has been captured. But don't just let Postgres, or don't just let Postman tell you that. Let's let Postgres tell us the same thing. Ta-da! We see here the level is now 40 and captured is true. So it looks like our update function has worked successfully. So that is pretty much it for right now. I believe there's also some material about how to test your Pokemon, your put method if you were to go into like the tests. So you would go into your test views, and this would be pretty similar to your get all Pokemon and get a Pokemon test. You would just write a test that also just checks, if you update your Pokemon to have all of the values that we want updated, and have the values that we didn't want to update, did those stay the same? That is in the material for tonight. That's about it for lecture. Hopefully relatively quick, relatively straightforward. Before we talk about tonight's assignment, anybody have any questions about anything we did?
Yeah, can I just take a look at the level up and change caught functions real quick?
Sure. Where did those go? Those are in models. So also all of this code again is directly from if you go to today's curriculum page and you look at the first heading that says starter code, and it says the application at the end of yesterday's lesson. That is literally exactly this. No changes. So
Okay.
I would recommend referring to that as well.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions, comments, concerns, questions about CRUD? Okay.